Max Orland, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. Can you believe it? Another round of SuperCoach is among us. And boy, there is a ton of stuff we've got to get through on this episode. There are a number of premium players that are highly priced, that are just getting it done every single week. I want to ask the question of the panel tonight. Is it worth paying up, and are we being stubborn not to go there? There's some cash cows that have hit their price points and break-evens that tells us time to go. There's some learnings and understandings about how and where players are scoring their SuperCoach points, and a ton of other stuff we've got to get through on this episode. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. Joining me on this episode, as he has ever since the Coaches Panel came into inception, it's fellow co-founder Ritz. Hello, mate. How are you? A real challenging week in SuperCoach. It feels like this week, so close to the mid-season buys. A lot of people are out of boosts. It does feel like a challenging week with decisions we've got to make.
Yeah, with a few injuries as well hanging over our heads, MJ.
Yeah, no, it's moving time from a rankings perspective at the moment, absolutely for sure. And then joining us on this episode, he featured in the 50 most relevant on an episode about Jackson Macrae and put to bed the myth of where does Macrae have to play to score his SuperCoach points. If you've been checking out his work on the social media platform of X, he is fast becoming, if not already, one of the leading experts in data and analysis for SuperCoach and for the other format that we don't mention on this episode of the podcast. It's Jaiden, mate. Nice to have you back, and I'm keen to hear some of the analytics and the data you bring for us today, because you're getting your head around SuperCoach and bringing a fresh perspective. Thanks for jumping back on the pod, mate.
Yeah, cheers, guys. And yeah, great to be here. It has felt a long time since that Macrae pod, but yeah, I've been having a pretty serious crack at SuperCoach this year for the first time. And yeah, before I did that, I wanted to have proper data to work with. So hopefully throughout this, you can get a bit more of an insight into the type of data that I look at with SuperCoach and explain player scores to detail that you've never seen before.
Looking forward to it. He's brought things like our understanding of stoppage and transition points well and truly to the forefront of the fantasy football community at large. And you're going to get some of those analysis elements right throughout this episode. Boys, we probably got to start, or it feels like most weeks we need to look at now at this point of the season. We've got a lot of our rookie priced or cash cow players that are really starting to hit that tipping point where they have hit a ton of cash made. They've given us a bank of good scores, but now are hitting places where break-evens are close to, if not unattainable, and if not starting to head into regression with the cash generation. There's probably two, Rids. Maybe we should start with the two most obvious ones. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're already fully aware about the two that I'm alluding to with the graphic on the screen. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, jump on board. You can enjoy every single episode we do on video as well. But Harley Reid has been phenomenal. He's pumped out some monster SuperCoach tons for us this year and really helped us through. And Matt Roberts is probably another. Picked up defensive status during the season. Both have been fieldable cash cows for us week in, week out. But with a change in role for Roberts and a threshold of points that Harley Reid has made, is it time to go for both of these players this week? Or can we afford to stagger the cash cows like these two over the next couple of weeks?
So I reckon Roberts has to go. Okay, so that one will just keep by himself. He's got a round 12 bye. He's got he's changed his role. He's been moved out of that distributor role at halfback. He's been pushed up onto a wing. He's now got a break even of 124. He's lost 27,000 just in the last week. He's got to go, before we absolutely... We're going to indent that 230K increase that he's had this year. If you still own him, and if you don't, great work getting off him last week. But he just has to go this week. So that one's the
priority one. Yeah, whether you're going up or down, irrelevant to some extent. Either way, he's out of your team. Understand?
Yes, correct. Harley Reid is the real intriguing one. Now, the why it's intriguing is he is best 22. He might even be the best 2 or 3 of the Eagles. Like that's saying something, yeah. So his role isn't going to really change from what it has been. He's shown through the season already he can absolutely score with the best of them. So it's going to be really, and I hate saying it, it's going to be team dependent with Harley Reid.
Absolutely.
If these two are absolutely your worst, you could actually go down to our bare basement rookie this week in Sullivan or Revel. Yep. And then get the other one up to whoever you want in the whole game, pretty much, okay? Yep. That's where it's at the moment. Now, the problem with Reid, though, is that break even. So it's going to take a couple of weeks for him to actually, he's going to likely go down a little bit, but then there's going to be the world where he levels out a little bit, and then he'll probably make a bit of cash. But it's going to be a 4-5 round turnaround if you do hold him. The thing about holding, though, is he's in the right line to hold. That's probably a really good and a bit of a cop-out. But again, we are talking about a line. It's not like fantasy or anything. SuperCoach is absolutely... There's options in that forward line, okay? Whether we're looking at the 2 Carlton key forwards, whether we're looking at, there are forward premiums going over 80 to close enough to 95. So there is a bit of a gap.
Luke Jackson Reid. Even. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Luke Jackson's a nice example, okay? He's got a great buy. He's got no Sean Darcy at this point in time. And who knows where that is? He might be back tomorrow. He might be back round 16 after the buys. Who knows with Sean Darcy? Sure. It could go either way. But the thing is, though, Harley Reid does have enough cash on his head. So that's nice. You don't often get these rookies getting up to 450,000. This guy is. So he's really only a short jump to anyone this week, yeah? And this is going to lead into a question later, I'm sure, about value versus the top price guys who have been absolutely smashing it. This is why we're having this conversation, because this kid has been absolutely a gun for a long period of time. Unfortunately, though, he had a rest. That rest doesn't seem to have done him much good, because after the rest, he's come back and he's sort of been, well, I'd say underwhelming, okay, after that 147 in round 6 against Freo, because he was building, Yep. Round 4, you can see he went 91 against Sydney. Then he had 108 against Richmond. And then he went 147 against Freo. So he was building. And it wasn't against easy opposition. Some of these opposition.
No, not at all.
No, exactly. Sydney's not easy. Freo have a full of midfield that is absolutely guns. So he's done that. But then after his break, he's come back, he's done 2 59s pretty much back to back against opposition that I would say, well, I would argue is potentially the same, if not easier, especially last week against Collingwood in that midfield with a lot of injuries. So there is that question, yeah? So I think if you don't have any other higher priorities in your team, it's time to go Harley and it's time to go Roberts. But you're in a good position. You can get to anyone, yeah?
Yeah, well, players like a Clayton Oliver, who was a highly traded in player last week, still attainable this week. No one have thought how little cash it's taking to put on top of either of these guys up to a legacy 120 player who has built over the past fortnight, especially. Incredible work. I'm curious. There's probably one other cash cow that people are considering moving out, and even as early as last week, people are thinking of moving back into Colby McKercher, who, unfortunately, for those that traded him out and now have traded him back in, probably in the last week, to be fair, it's been the most painful. He's now out with a foot injury. He's confirmed out by the club this week. He was on AFL 360 the other night and hoping to be back for round 11. But I think reading between the lines, the club are going to, and rightfully so, be super conservative with him, given that North Melbourne have the round 12 bye. They've wanted him for a long time, not a short couple of games. I'm fully expecting them to be conservative. I'll get your take on what him out might mean statistically for guys like Sheasel, Fisher, and Powell are probably the three most relevant SuperCoach Kangaroos in a moment. But where do you put someone like a McKercher into that mix as an injured player alongside a Roberts who's got a role change and a high break even, or a Reid who's best 22 but not quite back to his best? Where does the priority sit for you?
I feel pretty bad for the people who did go for Colby last week, because now he's got potentially, well, definitely this week, but potentially more out. In terms of where I lean with all three of those cash cows, the thing that I look for is where players can have a base of their points come from. So where can they score a particular aspect consistently, and then there's variation in other parts of that game which can create ceilings and floors, which is completely fine. But where does that base come from? So for someone like McKercher, I wouldn't be that worried if we know it's going to be a short-term injury and he's got that kick-in base that he can rely on. And that's something that really only came the last 3 weeks, which is why people were so keen last week with the 3-game price roll. So it's something I identified in the preseason, and North Melbourne don't generate enough turnovers to be able to have lots of high-scoring defenders like other teams like Fremantle or St Kilda have done in the past. They just don't generate enough turnovers. All the defense points are concentrated around the kick-ins, whether that's taking them or being the first to receive them for a +6. And over the last week, McKercher's been taking like 7 to 8 kick-ins per game. Like, they just can't turn the ball over, so they rely on getting it from a score. So I'm not too worried, because that's where his improvement has come from, with Sheasel's move higher up the ground. And that's pretty evident, like, as why Sheasel was going so well. It's from the kick-in points. And then for Harley Reid, I did just have a look then. He's actually the 3rd best forward based on possessions. So in SuperCoach, with the contested possessions being weighted so highly, obviously Heaney and Flanders are doing amazingly well, but he's actually the 3rd most. He's getting around half his score build from possessions, mainly contested. That's something that's pretty nice to look at, because it's almost a little bit of a flaw there for him. And then the spectacular marks and the goals can come after that. But yeah, I traded out Roberts last week, so I'm pretty keen. I was pretty keen to get off him with that role change. But with the other two, like, I traded out McKercher weeks and weeks ago, and now he's come and got these kick-ins, and it's really frustrating, because he is going to continue scoring really well if that's his main source, because that's just what the Kangaroos have done year on year on year. They don't generate enough turnovers, and it's all the ball is fed through 1 or 2 players on the kick-ins. Yeah,
it's good. In a moment, I'm keen on your take from an analytical and a data point of view. If there's anything knowing that McKercher's out, what we could maybe see from a Fisher, from a Powell, and from maybe a Sheasel as well in a moment. I'm keen on your take. But Rids, what's your intuitive thought about where this positionally might land? We have seen a lot of moving of the magnets from Clarko over the past really 6 weeks. Is understandably so. He's trying to understand who can do and play in what position. So he's trying to learn as much as he can about his squad and what's available to him. But Colby out, do you just think it's as simple as she's back into the halfback role, or are there some other nuances here that we might not be really paying attention to?
Well, at the end of the day, I actually think we've already seen it, okay? Sheasel's been moved up the field a little bit. Fisher has pretty much come in from being a vest a couple of weeks ago, and he's actually come in and he's got those kick-ins. He's had that role change, and it's for the better. For a start, I think Fisher's going to be the main distributor for North Melbourne. I don't think Clarkson was moving Sheasel because he was doing a bad job as being the distributor. He was bringing his teammates into the game. He was doing a lot right. I just think he wants to educate Sheasel moving forward into the midfield, into more, let's say, aggressive positions, okay, where you can actually impact the scoreboard better.
Sure.
I think that's just trying to put your main weapon up the ground into those scoring-like positions to try and do it. And Sheasel actually did pretty well last week. With that limited score that he got, he actually did pretty good in that role that he had. Now, Zach Fisher, can you believe that a lot of people, and I know Jaiden was one, but a lot of people traded out of McKercher, and then McKercher just went bang, bang, bang after that injury-affected score. And, you know, if you trade McKercher to Fisher today, it's 5,000, mate. That's all you're paying for it. It's pretty much a like for like. And Fisher has actually got a bigger negative break even than what McKercher does. That's the real amazing part of this, okay? Like, I know that the timing sucks for McKercher owners, and I'm one of them. Absolutely sucks. But the fact is, we do have another viable option that we probably were expecting earlier on in the season to take a more predominant distributor role in the back line anyway. So, I mean, I don't think it's a like for like, but I don't think it's the worst trade in the world, okay? As for Sheasel, who would know with Clarkson at the moment? Yeah, who would know what Tom Powell does this week? Who knows what Fisher's going to do? Who knows what Simpkins going to do? Because all of these guys impact their teammates wherever they play. Is Will Phillips named? Who knows, yeah? We just don't know enough right now. Like, and he's throwing the magnets around. He's trying people out. He's trying to find what fits best for his team. But that really is a worry as well, because you can't bank someone as having a continual role for weeks on end, because if they lose a couple of games, and they lost bad last week, MJ. So even though Sheasel did well, yep, great, but they lost by 70 points in Darwin, mate. Fisher had predominantly a lot of like those kick-ins, so he was quite effective coming out. I know that Clarkson was really impressed, and he was saying that in the media, like in the last few days, he was really happy with what he's seen from Fisher, and he was really happy with what he was seeing from McKercher. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't change it up, yeah? So who knows what it means? One thing you got to be careful with is trading into anyone with a yellow, not a yellow, but a blue and white stripe right now in North Melbourne is dangerous. It's probably more dangerous than Bevo at the Dogs. So you just got to be going into it with an open mind.
Yeah, it's good. Jaiden, is there anything from a data perspective that we could potentially learn from either while McKercher was out, or some movements that we've seen over the past 6 weeks that might aid us in either trading out of a player or positionally doing some things this week? Any data points there that can help us?
Yeah, I did kind of mention it before, but it's just looking for those. The kick-ins are just so important compared to any other team, because they just don't generate those D50 turnovers. They can't chip it around. They have to rely on getting the ball back by the opposition kicking them behind. So like Fisher's bumped up his kick-in numbers, and also his points that he's gotten from it. So if I just look across the board, Sheasel he was averaging nearly like 30 to 35 of his points from kick-ins, and maybe even some receives in there. That's completely dropped off. So that's where these players can bump up. And with McKercher out, like that's another 20 points that could potentially be going to Fisher. So yeah, I have actually traded in Fisher. I think it's pretty lucky because I almost got Colby last week for this exact reason. So I think maybe this is a sign to get him.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Well, all right. That might help us a little bit too. Maybe almost let's go the complete other side while we're talking about these value option in a Fisher who's got a great break even for us, defensive forward, and is really finding this high scoring spot. We've got a couple of guys at the moment that have legacy wise shown us they can score SuperCoach points with incredible ease. And throughout 2024, they just keep consistently pumping out really big tons. You could put a Caleb Sarong into the mix of that and an Isaac Heaney into the mix of that. Although I think a lot of people started with him with the opening round free look that we were given to us. But there's probably two Rids that, while relatively well owned in the top echelons, the chasing coach or the more unique coach probably don't have the Dane Zorko or the Luke Ryan. You could probably throw some other names into this mix, but really want to have a conversation with you around these players that are priced at the top end keep delivering, and they're getting so expensive or are hitting that peak expensive price. It does get hard to justify paying up for it when you feel like you're receiving all these value options every single week in most lines, but they're value for a reason. So what's your take? Are we just being stubborn by not getting a player like a Zorko, regardless of the buy in 2 weeks, a player like a Ryan who just keeps finding a way to get SuperCoach points every single week? Is it stubbornness? Is it aggressive to not get them? What's your take on these top end guys that keep getting points for us every single week?
So I think they have to be separated for a start. Okay. Let's separate Ryan and Zorko, because Zorko comes with other worries. Not his scoring potential, will he maintain it? It's what might happen to him that will throw a curveball at you, whether it's a Hemi in-game, in quarter
the
one.
Durability.
It's his age. It's like, he's doing a lot more running in the new role. So, and you can see it. He's as hungry as they come. He's as keen as they go. You can see how happy he is in the picture, mate. He loves it. Okay. He's as, and we talk about having an appetite for the ball. He's got the biggest appetite. And I know Nick Dacos, and I'm going to reference Nick Dacos as the one to go into Luke Ryan in a second. But Nick Dacos, he's got that. He is so thirsty. He's throwing his hands around. We see Goulden doing it, okay? These guys just want the ball, and Zorko's making them look like a Jackson McRae right now, okay? Just really laconic. So, but let's think about Nick Dacos. At the start of the year, I think everyone, every man, his dog, his auntie, his grandmother, was saying Nick Dacos would be the number one averaging defender for the year. You want to know how good Luke Ryan has been going, MJ? He's averaging 10 points more a game than Nick Dacos at number 2 right now. He's also the second highest averaging player in SuperCoach.
Overall,
Luke Ryan, we are just going, we're not going to get him. We're not going to get him. We're not going to pay up, but we're being stubborn now. We just have to bite the bullet because he's the reason why there's a few hundred points in rankings between you and potentially a top 1,000 spot right now. He's the one that's doing all the damage right now, especially if there's captaincy and there's VC loopholes and everything else, because his ceiling is as good as they get in the game. So that's why I wanted to highlight Luke Ryan.
He was a handball away from 200 a fortnight ago. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, and the problem is his upcoming draw is crazy good.
St
like
Kilda?
for defenders. One of them is St Kilda, but I mean, at times we do
this week.
highlight that St Kilda versus defenders, but we didn't see that actually come to fruition with Tom Stewart in round one, did we? So this, though,
No, not really.
I don't think we could actually come out and go, because you know what he did in his last game against St Kilda, Luke Ryan? 171 in SuperCoach, mate. In his last game at Marvel as well.
Cool.
If he's not screaming VCC option this week, you're potentially going to lose 100 points because most of these owners will be having a VC or a C option on him. So you're potentially really doing yourself a disservice.
So on both, I know that they're separate in a lot of different ways, but together in a moment. And Jaiden, in a second, I'm keen to get your thoughts on these guys specifically about the points they're getting and where they're earning them. I want to get your take on these two guys and maybe some others in a moment. But Rids, talk to me about this value options that we've got. We've got a Tom Stewart, who I want to talk more details in a second. He's down at $500,000. You've got a Clayton Oliver, who's incredible value at something he hasn't been probably since midway through his second season. So how do you balance out the guys, as you've said, that can take matchups away from you week in, week out versus the 150, 200,000 you can redeploy elsewhere? And in totality of points, maybe match what that one singular player that's taking a game away from it. What are the markers and processings you go through to help you make that determination?
Well, this is going to be really hard this week because we don't just have the Clary Olivers that represent value. We've got the next rungs below. No. We got an Alex Sexton right now going back into that distributor role for Gold Coast. He's at 220,000 right now. Yeah. We got a guy like Toby Conway coming into the team as sole ruck pretty much for Geelong tomorrow night against the Moyle, representing crazy value. Okay. We got Fisher. Absolutely. We only spoke about him 1 minute ago. Like he's 380,000 MJ. He could be, if we chat in 3 weeks' time, he could be nearly 500 by then. Like these are the guys that we're talking about right now. So that's the balance right now. But the fact is, traded into a Luke Ryan right now, he might be matching. Your team might be that good right now, but you're lacking someone like a Luke Ryan or who's highly owned like a Caleb Sarong going extremely well this year. Sure. And because you're not willing to spend that 100,000, even on weeks like this week where we've got Roberts, we've got McKercher, we've got Reed, all cullable, they're all ready to go to the abattoir, mate, and get culled. Yeah. Like, and if we're not going to spend it this week, then when are we going to spend it? And do we really want to invest maybe 3 trades? Do we want to go to a Zach Fisher to make 100,000 to then jump onto another guy to then get to Zorko? How many trades are we willing to spend when it's a simple one down, one up to get some of these guys at the top dollar? That's the dilemma.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good way of shaping it. So Jaiden, help us through like these two guys specifically, and where and how are they scoring so well so that, as Rids articulated, every week it just feels like when you're going against them in matchups or your rankings battle and you see who's in that top 100,000, you're like, oh, every week I just can't make up ground. How and where are they scoring? And what does it mean for us that are in the chasing pack or those that own him? How can we keep protecting that space?
Ryan is a very controversial player at the moment in the SuperCoach community. Like he's scoring so well, but people don't really look at it and think he should be scoring so well. I did a bit of a tweet about it the other day. With Ryan, like I looked through the numbers today. So we talk about his like getting junk possessions and things like that. That doesn't really matter because his disposal is incredibly good based on where he's winning the ball and then how he's setting up other players. So like a typical Luke Ryan kick is he's all on his own. He's in D50 where he gets a bit more of a bonus just from being inside D50. He kicks it out to a player on the wing all on their own, and that's probably 5 points just on its own, just for doing that. And he does that over and over. And you can see that for Ryan, because if I collate all the sources where players are scoring that points from, Ryan is scoring 74 points per game just from his disposals. So his possessions don't make up that much of his score. He's pretty like normal defender across the board, but his disposal is just way too good. So the next best player in the comp is Lockie Whitfield at 57. So he's 17 points better in his disposals. And that's
huge.
And no other player in the last 4 years has gone over 60 for the year. So he's 15 points better than anyone else has ever done. So I'm pretty keen to get him this week just based on that. He's just got that perfect role. So we know that in SuperCoach you want to be kicking long, which is what he's doing, but he's also not kicking backwards, because if you watch a game where he's playing, he's the last player in defence. So while he might be receiving the backwards kicks, like a stat that he's been the leader in the last 4 years, he's the furthest back. He's getting an uncontested mark worth maybe 1 or 2 points, not very much. But then he's kicking long, he's kicking effectively, and he's just destroying everything. And Zorko's in a similar vein. He's not too far down the disposal list at 53. So that's where a lot of his points are coming from as well. And that's typically the type of player that you actually want to look for in a different line. So we're looking for defenders and forwards. Defenders are pretty obvious, but especially
I just MailChimped my marketing.
You MailChimped your what?
I MailChimped my marketing with AI to create an effective marketing campaign in minutes.
No, MailChimp and Way.
Yes, MailChimp and Way. Now I can hyper-personalize my campaigns across email and SMS.
You can do all that with MailChimp?
What did I just MailChimp and say?
MailChimp your marketing with the #1 AI-powered email marketing and automation platform, Intuit MailChimp. #1 based on publicly available data on competitors' customers. Plans vary. SMS available as add-ons. Visit MailChimp.com.
This year where we've got a lot of players moving into defence that we're wanting to target, players like Fisher that we've spoken about. It's just way too valuable to have a player getting the ball that much and someone who can use it pretty well. So he's just doing really well in that as well. And yeah, a lot of D50 bonus points is also helping. So that's kind of where I sit with those two. Their disposal is just so good and they're getting it so much. And like, what do the SuperCoach community want them to do? Like, kick it out on the full a few times? Like, they're going to keep kicking it effectively. And unless someone goes and sits on them, then they're just going to continue doing that. And with Ryan, he's just cracked the formula like to the max. He's just sitting in defensive 50. Where he gets a boost just from not being with that boost. They like to weight the D50 acts about 20% more just because it's in a scoring zone. So that's where I sit with Ryan. Like, I just feel like you have to get him this week, and against St Kilda, it's pretty obvious. And then I guess just in general with some of the others we mentioned. So
please.
Tom Stewart came up and he's kind of just dropped off a little bit in his disposal, like the amount of not his disposal efficiency, say, but more how much he's getting the ball. So he's fairly consistent over the last 4 years in his marking, his tackles, whether he's getting defensive acts like the 1%ers and spoils. He's pretty consistent across that. So that looks fine, but he's just not getting the ball as much. So I'm not entirely sure why that might be. Maybe it's because the Cats are a bit better this year and the ball's maybe not in the defensive half a bit more. But that seems
there's a Zach Guthrie who's had a really good season. that be potentially one of the impact points?
What about Max Holmes? Max Holmes as well.
Oh, yeah.
Max Holmes has come into that back line too. So it's probably those two who, in a combination's doing that. So I'll come back because there are a few more players I want to get your thoughts on, but you brought up Tom Stewart, so it's probably a nice time to mention him. You've got this guy who historically is this 110 guy, Rids, and Jaiden's just done a great bit of pointing out where he's not getting the ball. We've been able to identify probably the source codes of that. But history would tell us, Rids, Tom Stewart, where he's bottomed out in price, 500K. Okay, he's 1,500 above that. But what do you do with a player like a Tom Stewart? Because Luke Ryan's 160-odd thousand more. You'd feel based on legacy, Stewart and Ryan is negligible. But as Jaiden's done a great job helping us to see where the trend drop-off has come from Stewart, where the trend scoring is hitting for Ryan, what do you do with a player like Tom Stewart who feels like every old school super coach rule under the sun would say this is the week to get Tom Stewart? What's your take on that, Rids?
My take is everyone seems to be going into the back line. Okay. All the high scoring as a consistent group is going into the back line right now. And you can see it. Okay. You have a look at that average, mate, for Tom Stewart on the picture right there. That's 96.6. That doesn't seem terrible to me. And you've been playing for years. That would be actually a very happy to take that as a D6 right now, wouldn't you? Like in years gone by.
Yeah, absolutely.
But guess what? This year, I don't know if that's going to cut the mustard in the defensive line at 96. The problem we got with Tom Stewart, okay, is his history. If he gets back to where he's been, and I'm talking about the quality, because Jaiden explained it perfectly, okay? But I really do believe it's Max Holmes that's really affecting him right now. And you mentioned Zach Guthrie a minute ago, but I would counter that with your Zach Tui's in years gone by and a few others in the back line in years gone by. Okay. And they all level out a bit, okay? Sure. But it's Max Holmes who's been pushed behind the ball. And the reason why he's been pushed behind the ball is to get speed on the ball. So that really hurts Tom Stewart and his game of chip mark, controlling the play, playing at a tempo, because Max Holmes is there to actually put speed on the ball. So they sort of work against each other a bit. And what you'll tend to find is when Tom Stewart does his intercepts, he's releasing a Max Holmes to then go. So that's the difference this year. And that's why he's such an interesting discussion right now. And I reckon there's another discussion that I've asked you about another name, and that's a Fremantle guy. But this one here, there's no role change. He's playing pretty much the same. He's in good form. He passes the eye test. It's really the style of play by Geelong that's changed, and that's all about Max Holmes, Yeah, it's really interesting.
Maybe you've got some other thoughts on Tom while we're there. It's okay, but back to that player points and where are they earning them? Like, whether it be a Tom or others, what are some other things that, like right at that top, that you're seeing and observing that either in a SuperCoach community we haven't been able to put articulations this happened, or just some things that are just, this is obvious, you can't miss that? What are some takeaways you've got for us there? And that can include Stewart if you've got something.
Yeah, well, I do have something quickly on Stewart. It's he's not really taking the big contested intercept marks inside D50, and with my model, that's the highest scoring act you can do in a game. So that's around, I think, 7 by memory, or maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's 9 in the D50 boost. So he's not really getting those contested marks. I know earlier in the year, people were a little bit confused at why his scoring maybe wasn't as high as what it was in the past. there's obviously those disposal things that Rid's greatly pointed out that completely went over my head when I was trying to think of what was wrong with Stewart, but that's exactly right. Just with the marking, like a lot of his intercepts are actually coming uncontested, and that's like worth half as much. So there's a pretty quick drop off there, and he's not being relied on as much in the back half with that really good defense to be the only man there to take that intercept mark, contested over the top, things like that. So there is a little bit of that going on. And I think it's something in the community that people talk about a lot. They'll often compare stats without thinking about them, I guess, more deeply. So like the SuperCoach game is just incredibly deep.
Sure.
And the things that I've kind of noticed this year, because I've just fairly started taking it seriously, and people tend to like compare games. So they'll say, even on the weekend, there was examples of Max Gawn and maybe not playing particularly well, and still getting really highly scored. Petrarca played incredibly, and he wasn't that far ahead of him. But then they're comparing to someone like Luke Ryan, who played in a different game, and he also scored 111. And people were quite frustrated by maybe what they're seeing doesn't line up to the score. But I think like I don't ever get frustrated by player scores because I actually understand it. So like I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen in the SuperCoach community around everything is actually really predictable. There's no bonus points being given to certain players because of their name. Like it's incredibly consistent, but you just need to understand what's going on. And I think one of the biggest learnings that I've had is you can't compare two separate games to each other. So Tim English this week scored really low. And you could argue that his game this week against Richmond was just as good as his game the previous week, if you just look at the raw stats and consider what's going on. But the thing about the SuperCoach scoring system is every single game is worth the same. But if you play other games, you know that the different teams score different amounts of points and it adds up to different values. Like Port Adelaide are incredibly restrictive and they don't really get the ball that much themselves. But we talk about the St Kilda matchup because they just allow so many points to be scored. So the 3,300 points per game rule means you can't actually compare two separate games to one another. You can only compare games within themselves. You can't ever actually compare two separate games because, the thing I've learned the most is the 3,300 rule is just actually incredibly important, like way more important than I ever imagined, because of that reason. Like you've got really high disposal teams, but then you've also got low disposal teams. And what happens when they play each other? What happens when two restrictive teams play each other? The points need to be made up to 3,300, but then you get a game under the roof at Marvel where they just play chip to chip the whole game. And technically there would be a lot of points to go around, but they need to be brought back down. So there's a lot going on underneath, but if you don't try and compare scores within separate games because the 3,300 rule is doing quite a lot of work in that. You can't look at a player's stat line without considering that they've played against a really easy team. So there was a lot of points to go around and it all needs to be brought back to the same level.
And just to emphasize that,
super helpful.
So MJ, just to emphasize and drive home that when you watch the game, okay, from a neutral, from a footy lover's point of view, okay, you listen to the names I'm going to call out and remember back to that absolute travesty of a game, Richmond versus Bulldogs, okay? I would argue Ed Richards was possibly the best player on the ground. Guess what, mate? He scored 163 in the game and he top scored for the game. Adam Treloar, again, he was awesome in this game of football. He had mid-30 touches, if not, he was everywhere, yeah? He was the second top scorer. Harms kicked 4 goals, mate, and he did pretty well. You know, he was very influential. I thought Bontempelli had his best game for the season. Even Norton was good. You know, Darcy was great. Dale, he was really, really effective. Like, all of them were better than English. But let's just take the score out of it, okay? English and McRae. I actually thought both of them played an all right game of football against witches' hats, yellow and black witches' hats. And you can see by my avatar, I'm yellow and black. So I was filthy at these guys, rightio. But they were just as effective as each other. Their games pretty much were on a par in my eyes, because I thought McRae did a couple of good things. I thought English did a couple of good things. Mate, they only scored 1 point different, 87 to 86 for the game of footy. Now, take it to the other side. Let's flip it over to Richmond. And don't forget the 3,300 points, mate. There was not one Tiger in this game of football that I rated but guess who was the top scorer for the game? Their captain and their ruckman, English's opposition ruckman in Nankervis. Yeah, he didn't. There was no 100 for Richmond, okay? But Nankervis was their best player. So in relation, they sort of marry up, yeah? And I know there's always outliers in certain games as we go along, but we got to make sure we're not just being angry for the sake of being angry at times. I actually think this game of football married up with what I saw, and I watched that game for the whole game, unfortunately. It did marry up, mate. So I actually think this is a game where the SC scoring aligned with what I saw. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. I know there's going to be question marks around the Luke Ryan thing, but I think Jaiden's explained why. And I just wanted to back down that Luke Ryan
really
one
well.
Again.
Yeah.
You think about what the difference is in that Freo team right now. They found themselves a winger, mate, this year. They've got someone who can actually run down, up and down that wing, okay, and sharp. Who else is missing from that Freo? Often we saw in seasons gone by a Brendan Cox chip into Luke Ryan, chip him back to Cox, doing the chippy. He's not there at the moment, mate. So Luke Ryan's adjusted to not having his kick buddy. And you know what else they've done? They've got Ryan Clark as the main distributor in that back line. Again, you think about Max Clark, because I'm thinking of Max Holmes, yeah? So you think about it, though, they are together. You think about it, they're in that back
they've changed that dynamic.
To put speed on the ball. So that's the differences in the team makeup. And no wonder Luke Ryan's playing his part to a T, because he's not playing outside. He's not trying to take the impossible kick. He knows what he does. He knows what he does well. He knows how his role is most effective for the team, and he's not going outside of the boundaries. So that's the difference. There is a team dynamic and a team changes that actually promote some of these guys to actually take the next step in SC scoring.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think what you've done for the community, both of you unpacking a number of elements. And the better we can understand elements in the game that maybe we've thought or assumed, the better we actually start to be able to articulate it. It helps us with in-game decisions, in-season trading, the way we start our squads. And Riz, you alluded to a player, and I'm keen to get your take on him in a minute. But Jaiden, talk to me about the season of Hayden Young, a really popular starting squad option, much like a Nick Martin. A lot of people moved off after round 2. Some held the faith with both of them, and they'd feel relatively justified, but pretty similar in that average of what a Tom Stewart's doing, sitting in that 96, priced a little bit more, but up at 528. And his break even now is at this point where I don't know if owners are prioritising trading out of him. I'm not too sure if that's there. But what's your take on the season of Jaiden Young statistically, what he's scoring, how he's scoring? And then after that, I'm also keen on your reflection of where is this top line of defence average that we need to get into? Because a 96 feels good historically, but it's not quite as high as historically. I've asked like 8 questions there, so I'm sorry. But talk to me about the season of Jaiden Young in general for a moment.
Yeah, he's quite an interesting one because I'm sure everyone started with him. The thing that I picked up really quickly was the clangers. So I think after 3 or 4 rounds, he was averaging around 25 or so points lost every single game just from clangers. That's free kicks against, that's just dropping the ball randomly, that's kicking it poorly, handballing it poorly. And those things come with a midfield role, but it's something that you need to consider a lot more in SuperCoach because you need to weigh up whether this move into the midfield is going to outweigh the points that he's going to lose by not getting a D50 boost for his stats. And that's something we saw with Jack Sinclair last year. His scoring in the midfield maybe wasn't as good because he's not getting those bonus points in defence. So as soon as Jaiden Young was losing 25 points per game from clangers, a lot of people got off him straight away. He's turned that around though. Like he was the clear number one. He's down to now just 13 points from clangers lost every game. So that's kind of normal now for a midfielder, somewhere around that. He's definitely not in the top 10 anymore, so it's nothing to worry about. It's probably just that his possession points aren't that high. So he's only scoring 39 points per game from possessions. And I think I know the main reason for that. And if we just look at Sarong, who's the number one player in the game, he's doing 64. He's doing 64 points for possessions per game.
Gosh.
Which is, third best behind Clayton Oliver the last 2 years before that. So, no one's on Sarong's level. So there's not really that possession stuff that Jaiden Young's getting. So I don't think at a 96, he's going to be pushing he's pushing the top 6, but I don't think he will be there. He's probably going to be more of that with the defender mid. He can be pretty useful around the D7 range or in M9, but I can't see him with Sarong going so well, and even Fife. Like Fife is actually the 4th best forward for these possession points, so they're going pretty well in their contested wise. And these defensive type midfielders, unless they're a massive tackler, he's not going to be able to really get up to that top 6 or really take the season away from you like someone like Ryan is doing, where he's the clear number one in an aspect of SuperCoach scoring.
And I think this is a really good lesson
Ritz, on that,
MJ. So when we start thinking about next year, now I'm not saying we start now, but this is a perfect example.
No, just a little black book to not write it down.
Yeah, but we all took Jaiden Young as almost a walk-up start in our teams, Radio. But I think times have changed now, where we're more looking for efficiency. We're more looking for those D50, like what Jaiden's been expressing the last couple of minutes, where if someone goes into the midfield role like a Jaiden Young has, and this isn't going to be a one case fits all, but the fact is, if you've got ball-winning guys in there like a Caleb Sarong, like a Brayshaw, we all knew Fife was already touted for that midfield role, and we're talking that may not be the absolute slam dunk starting pick that we all put him down to, especially if you play across multiple formats. Because when I look at Jaiden Young, I feel like he's definitely in the top 6 of an AF fantasy scoring, in that line. He's in that conversation. But in SuperCoach, he's down at 96. And we just talked about Tom Stewart having an underwhelming year at 96. I would be more confident at Tom Stewart going to 105 and 110 to finish the year than what I would be with a Young, unless there's an injury that plays a havoc there with that midfield mix at Freo. But that's sometimes what we're looking for.
Sure.
I just wanted to highlight Hayden Young because I think it's a really good time of the year as we're just about to enter the buys. We're not suggesting to trade out of Hayden Young at all. He's going to play a very crucial part, okay, as we manage the buys. But this is a really good lesson moving into next year, into looking at starting lineups where we may be better off going against the crowd. So that's a nice, interesting comment.
Well, he's currently the 20th ranked defender by average. We've got 10 going 100 plus. I think we've got 4 or 5 going 110 plus. One of them's an Elliot Yeo, who at time of recording is out injured and not confirmed, but yeah, it's all these core elements that you've both been referencing.
But you think about the names.
I agree. I wouldn't be trading him out yet, but at the buy, at the end of them, it's interesting.
So think about the names that we're seeing there that we would never have expected at this time at the start of the year, okay? Andrew McGrath is sitting at number 9, mate, currently averaging 103. Like, I know that his role's been up in the air at times, but we can see that his role has slightly modified, slightly changed, and the change in that was Nick Martin, We're seeing Nick Martin right now going very well, but he's going to be more prone to an inefficient kick or a clanger because he is taking the game on. That's the role that he's playing. So that does limit his ceiling because of the role. Let's have a look at some of the other names. Jeremy McGovern, he's always been a high intercept type player. I was going to say he's the Eagles version of Luke Ryan without actually being Luke Ryan, as effective as what Luke Ryan is, righty-ho. But he's that version. Nick Floston, another guy. Nick Blakey. Guess what? He takes the ball and he takes the game on, But you can see a real trend. It's either one or the other.
You can.
It's not really those types that move into the midfield that are jumping through the roof. At times, there's always going to be a player here and there that does that. But in the defensive line and the way that the game is being played right now, people are looking at speed on the ball, at rebounding a lot quicker, moving the ball, being a bit more attacking, whilst the opportunity of finals is still there.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's one last player I want to ask you boys both about before we wrap up this episode. And I think if you've been listening or watching this episode to date, there's been so much gold that has been shared for you, not just to help you through the decisions you're making this week, but really to set you up for success for the back half of the year and also to inform just some starting squad decisions that you're going to make for 2025. So definitely something for you I'm going to encourage you to come back to at multiple times, although elements might not be specifically helpful about a player. The nuances, the learnings, the unpacking of stats and understanding the game is going to help you. But there's this interesting guy, and the ruck line feels really interesting to me this year in SuperCoach. You could argue a top 3, how you want to order those 3. You can go, and I'm alluding to Marshall, English, and Max Gawn. Then you've got a Tristan Cherry who has more than done his job to this point and is coming at an interesting junction of when and where do you move off him. You've got a Jordan Sweet who at time of recording hasn't been confirmed to play this week, but everyone internally within the club is quite confident that he'll be fit and back to play. And then you've got a Todd Goldstein, who I want to ask you guys about, who as a legacy scorer is one of the safest, most bulletproof 95 scoring ruckman almost ever in the game. Draper's now out for the foreseeable, certainly up until the bye. And so it's this interesting spot we're at where you could argue Cherry's done his job. If you're running a combo of English, Gawn, or Marshall in 2 of those 3, you're not interested. But for Cherry owners, Rids, talk to me about a Todd Goldstein in this spot because he's been priced where he is due to ruck sharing. He's now got a clear and defined opportunity here. I'm sure Jaiden's got some stats for us in this area that might be able to help us. But what's your take? Is it a cherry only play, or are there some other avenues here?
No, there's definitely some other avenues. And the thing is, we still got to generate some cash, okay? As we, like a lot of the teams have gone very hard with the boosts. You go and have a look at the rankings teams. You go have a look at the top scorers from last week, 24, 25, 20. Like, it was ridiculous, some of the teams that I was looking at last week, okay? Because people with the boosts, what we've done is we've just turned it into a trade-a-thon, and people like culling a lot of these cards. I know there was a big discussion in the preseason. I don't want to open the can of worms, okay, with adding more trades and everything, but it did lose a little bit of dynamic of how the strategy of holding your trades and how to do it, because people have just gone hammer and tong, rightio? And why not?
Yes.
That's plain and simple, yeah. But these are the opportunities that we seem to miss because right now we don't have that extra trade up our sleeve. Now, I wouldn't be suggesting to go into a Goldstein at all, okay? But you've got to start exploring these options because sometimes we get a gift horse, okay, with an injury, with a role change from the mid-season and like later in after the buys. This could potentially be that gift horse we're looking at. But he's a round 14 guy. There's not like you've got one of those absolute standout premiums, rucks, to go to unless you don't own Gawn. Otherwise, you're going to have Gawn and Goldstein where they're two in the round 14 buy. So that doesn't quite work. Whereas you've got Sweet, you've got Conway, you've got all these money-making things. But would you be really surprised if Goldstein doesn't? Like, there's a chance here that he's going 100, 110 as sole ruck over the next 4-5 weeks of football.
Month.
Really.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about is a buy play where we're actually generating 150,000. We're generating decent fieldable scores that can match any premium on that line. They're the opportunities that we miss out on by going so aggressive at the start. And I'm not saying Goldstein, but he's a perfect example of what I'm trying to get across, yeah? Because a lot of us went to the Sweets as R2 or to the Conways, as R3 this week, like potentially.
Yeah.
Like, we did take that risk. But you think about it, MJ. We had people trading out of Marshall 2 weeks ago, jumping onto Sweet. Like, that's a top, arguably a top 2-3 ruck premium for the year.
Primo.
And we're trading him to $120,000 or $150,000 rook. Like, that's the sort of strategy, I say that tongue in cheek, that we've actually been introduced to this year by upping those trades. But it is getting to the point of working out, is it risk appetite? Are we just going to go, you know what, we got extra trades this year. If we get it wrong, we're just going to go again. We're going to flip our Tom Powell to our Goldstein, for instance, this week to cover a Sweet if he is out this week. Or are we going to look at but there is that possibility, yeah? They're the things that we've sort of lost a little bit in regards to strategy because we're all trying to keep up with the pack because the pack is streaking, mate.
Yeah.
They're running and they're sprinting.
They are a long way ahead. They certainly are. Hey, sorry, I cut you off.
Listen in. Starbucks. It's a great day for coffee.
Then, they are. We're almost 2 weeks ahead of what over seasons gone by, with the introduction of boost, with the introduction of taking riskier elements into the game of how we trade it, and sometimes that working out, our upgrade cadence is 2 to 3 weeks ahead
And
of
guess
what
what, MJ?
historically it could have been with less amount of trades and the boosts. Yes.
And just the last point that I was going to kill off is we're trading out
Please.
of rookies, not even at top dollar, not even close to top dollar, with sometimes very attainable break evens, potentially not just this week, but for 2 or 3 weeks, like with just standard scoring. Like, this is what has been introduced, but we're not putting the hurt factor on coaches who've done that, because they've been able to generate enough cash and put it on top of guys to get to the premiums quicker. And that's where we've sort of lost that strategy of, once upon a time, there used to be 24 trades, and we used to go, you use them or you hold them and you go later in the season when the carnage hits, when teams like Richmond and North Melbourne put guys in cotton wool because they're not going to play finals. They're going to give rookies a run. That's sort of, we don't even have that discussion anymore, do we? We're not saving trades for this period of time.
Not really.
Because people are going, you know what? I'm going to be 1,000 points ahead of you. So if any bad luck strikes me, even if I'm running a donut for 8 weeks and you've got a premium, I'm still likely to be ahead of you anyway, points-wise. And that's where we've sort of lost that strategy aspect of SuperCoach. Of Dream Team to a point as well, but that's where that anger was in the preseason. So I got the discussions. I'm also happy to keep people more involved by giving them more trades and giving them more access to trades week to week.
It changes the game.
It's just different. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just different. But people have to adjust their mindsets, because the older generation like me, okay, I'm 48, or I'm 48 in a couple of weeks. And the thing is, like, I was grown up going, no, you conserve, you trust your premiums, you don't jump off guys. Whereas the new age fantasy style of SuperCoach, and you can see guys like Selby have come across, pumping the value. We're going for this, we're going for that. And whether it pays off or not, we'll know later. We'll know in 10 rounds' time, But guys like Jaiden, who are new to SuperCoach and trying to play it seriously and take it more seriously, like, just don't understand the history of where we've had to change from. Because the kids these days with the new age guys haven't had to make that adjustment yet. And I'm not calling anyone, I'm not trying to be rude or anything. I'm just
that's
saying,
all they've known.
That's just all they know.
No, you're just explaining.
Yeah, so it's not wrong.
Correct.
It's not right.
Yeah, they haven't had to adapt to an evolving game.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's fair enough too. You boys have been awesome on this episode, and Jaiden is definitely the youngest of us two combined. So let's not get into the age factor of that. Hey, Jaiden, where can people get in touch with you across social media, and what some web connections they can have for you as well, whether it be some of the stats and the info you're sharing for us?
Yeah, awesome, guys. Thanks for having me on. I've definitely experienced that a bit, Rids. I've wasted like 6 trades in my rucks with Marshall, and then okay, let's get off Marshall. I'm feeling like what, like, did I even think this through? But yeah, you can find me. I guess the best way is on Twitter at Jaiden_Poposky. I'm on there. That's where I put most of my stuff. And in my bio, you'll find a link to my website, statsbyjaiden.com.au. I talked earlier about Luke Ryan being dominant in the disposal points. I've got on the SuperCoach homepage on my site, I've got top 10 leaderboards of all the different stats that the players could be scoring in. So that's where I got that Luke Ryan stat from. So if you can to look at more of that, you can jump over there.
And MJ, I'm just going to say,
make sure you do that. We've got both his social media thing and that in the description of the episode. Yes, mate.
Yeah. For all the cranky old men like me that yell at the clouds as they drift by, go and jump on this website well, because sometimes we
ripper.
want to push back when we see stats and see these new things, terms, new whatever. But guess what? What Jaiden's doing right now, stats-wise, is like he's the best in the business at doing this, and he's giving us a service here. Go and check it out. Before you go get cranky and throw heat, go and have a look at it. And guess what? There's a little feature there where you can actually buy the guy a drink. Yeah, I'm probably due to buy him about 20 of them. But go and do it, because we're all old.
You need to click the link, mate.
We have all got, we've already got our careers and everything else. Let's go support some of these young guys who are just starting off a career, yeah? And just think about it first. It's okay to be changing. It's okay to be different. It's okay that someone else is introducing something new. That's just what happens in life, yeah? So let's go out and actually support each other and be really cool with this, yeah?
Yep, totally agree with that. All the details, as I said, for Jaiden's, we can get in touch with him on Twitter, and also that website, and the opportunity to chip in some support to the great work he's doing in the SuperCoach community. He's also doing some stuff in the AFL fantasy community. It's been awesome. Make sure you do that. Rids, as always, a pleasure, mate, to chat and hear some of your wisdom in the SuperCoach world as well.
Mate, that's 2 times in 2 days we've chatted. Our wives are going to actually ask questions soon. What's going on here?
No, that's definitely not going to be a concern at all. But if you want to go and check out any of the episodes that we've done right throughout the season or pre-season, you can go and listen to every single podcast episode. There's a SuperCoach specific YouTube episode looking at 7 potential bargains. You can go and check that out. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure you go and do that. We'll talk DPPs as an exclusive video early next week. Jaiden's done a power of work to support us and the community in that space, and really taking the surprise out of it with the reveals just quietly. He's got that good at being able to identify who and what and where. So we'll share that with you next week. You can also make sure, if you haven't already, subscribed and given a 5-star rating to the podcast episodes we do. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us. And in the description of this episode, the details to connect with Jaiden, where you can follow us across social media and become part of our Patreon supporter group with a bunch of additional content, extra podcasts, hidden group access, and a ton of other awards you want to get involved in. We'd love to welcome you into the Patreon community. Hey, good luck heading into round 12. Thursday night footy is back on yet again. I hope your vice captaincy score absolutely crushes it, so you don't have to worry about later in the round captain. I hope rookie roulette is kind to you, and every trade you make, you're on the upside of it. Good luck this week.